When you're the younger sibling, you get used to a certain level of blame. Broken remote? My fault. Missing snacks? Somehow me, even if I wasn't home. But that summer, God, that summer, it went way beyond spilled milk or a dented wall. It was the year I got grounded for 3 months for a car crash I didn't commit. And the worst part? I didn't even have a license. I wasn't even in the car. My name is Andres, and I was 19 when this happened. Still living at home, still figuring life out. The kind of kid who spends more time in his sketchbook than outside, who never really got into parties or late-night drives like my older brother Caleb. He was 21 then, charming, loud, effortlessly cool in that manipulative way you don't really see until you step back far enough. He had a way of making everyone in the room like him, or at least believe him, especially our parents. Our dad worked long hours as an HVAC contractor, and our mom was a part-time dental hygienist with a full-time obsession with appearances. We lived in a tidy little suburb where people waved too much and gossiped even more. In our house, being the golden child wasn't about grades or good deeds. It was about charisma. Caleb had it. I didn't. To be fair, I'd never been a problem. I kept to myself, got decent grades, worked at the bookstore down by the lake. Quiet kid, not particularly impressive, which made it very easy to paint me as the scapegoat when things went south. And Caleb? He was all about image. Always had a story, always had an excuse, always had the spotlight. I used to think he was just a show-off. I didn't realize until later how dangerous he could be when he needed to protect his lies. It started in early June, the first week of summer break. I remember because I'd just finished helping my mom clean out the garage, and I was sitting on the front steps sketching our neighbor's cat, when Caleb pulled up in Dad's old Ford Taurus. That thing was a tank, faded gold paint, cracked leather seats, smelled like pine air freshener and engine oil. It had been Caleb's car since he rescued it from the driveway a year earlier, even though technically it was still under Dad's name for insurance. He parked it fast, too fast. The front bumper scraped the curb, and I heard something rattling from underneath when he cut the engine. The passenger mirror was missing entirely, and there was a long, jagged scrape down the passenger side. It looked like he'd tried to squeeze past a brick wall and lost. I stood up slowly, squinting. What happened to the side? Caleb didn't even look at me. He just slammed the door and walked past with a fake yawn. Ask the idiot who crashed it. I blinked. Wait, you crashed it. He turned, paused, then smirked. I didn't, but someone sure did. And then he went inside, just like that. No explanation, no context. I stood there, frowning, until Mom came outside to ask if I'd seen her gardening gloves. She didn't even notice the car at first. Later that evening, I was in the kitchen heating up leftovers when Dad came storming in like a tornado. Red face, heavy boots, holding his phone like it had personally betrayed him. Andres. Living room. Now, I looked at Mom, who just raised her eyebrows and followed us in. Caleb was already sitting on the couch, arms folded, looking bored. My stomach dropped. I get a call from insurance, Dad growled. They say there's damage to the Ford, and someone reported it from the scene. Hit a parked car. No note left. Sound familiar? I shook my head slowly. No, I wasn't even. Caleb says you took it. I blinked. What? I don't even have a license. You've driven before, Caleb added casually. You begged me to let you practice in the school lot, remember? Last week. You said you wanted to surprise Dad with your progress. No, I didn't, I said sharply. That never happened. Caleb shrugged. Maybe you forgot. I looked at my parents, waiting for them to laugh, to roll their eyes and say, nice try, Caleb. But they didn't. Dad's jaw clenched. Mom's eyes narrowed. You've been acting distracted lately, she said. Maybe you weren't paying attention. You've been home all week, haven't you? No, I said louder now. I've been working. Ask Marcy at the bookstore. But Dad was already on a roll. You think you're old enough to drive, but not old enough to take responsibility? You took the car without asking, you scraped it, and now we have a claim against our name. Do you know what that does to our premiums? I didn't take the car. I snapped. Then who did? Caleb asked innocently, picking at his thumbnail. Because I didn't. And I'm the only other person who drives it. I stared at him. His face was blank. No guilt. No hesitation. Just calm, calculated deflection. I wanted to scream. But you parked it today. Yeah. After I got it back from you. Dad shook his head. You're grounded. For the summer. I felt like the air had been punched out of my chest. What? That's insane. No phone. No sketchbook. No bookstore. You're staying home until you learn how to respect people's property. But I didn't. End of discussion, he snapped. And that was it. My summer? Gone. Just like that. Based on a lie told in a single sentence. They didn't want proof. They didn't want logic. They wanted to believe the kid who always made them laugh. The one who knew how to spin a story. And well, I didn't have charisma. I had truth. And apparently, that wasn't enough. The days that followed were like prison. No TV. No internet. No texting my friends. They took my sketchbooks and locked them in Dad's filing cabinet. Caleb walked around like royalty, tossing the car keys on the kitchen counter every morning like a victory dance. He even winked at me once and said, "Hope you're enjoying your staycation." I wanted to punch him. But more than that, I wanted to prove it. I wanted to make them see who he really was. But it wasn't until that 4th of July cookout, when the backyard was full of hot dogs and uncles and cheap beer, that I got my first clue. Because that was the day Caleb laughed too loud, too long, and said something he didn't think anyone else would hear. Something that would finally start to unravel everything. I barely remember what song was playing. Something poppy and upbeat, totally wrong for the moment. The kind of song that plays in the background while your life unravels in slow motion. I was holding a paper plate stacked with potato salad I didn't want when I heard Caleb laugh. It wasn't just any laugh, it was his laugh. That smug, drawn-out chuckle that always meant someone else was about to suffer so he could shine. And he totally bought it. Caleb said, voice louder than necessary. I told him, yeah, Andres took the car, I tried to stop him. And boom, grounded for 3 months. Didn't even question it. Honestly, it was too easy. I froze. I hadn't even been near him, just a few feet away in the shade by the back fence, hoping to avoid small talk with our Aunt Sheila. But now, I turned, slowly, and saw him with his buddies near the grill. Red Solo cup in one hand, burger in the other, grinning like he'd just won a game no one else knew he was playing. They laughed along, not because it was funny, but because that's what people did around Caleb. They followed the current of his personality. I wasn't even sure if they knew what he was referring to. Maybe they thought it was just another prank story, just another wild tale from the Golden Child. But then my Uncle Luis, who had just stepped out of the house with a folder in his hand, paused mid-step. He heard it too. What was that? Luis asked, his voice not angry yet, just curious, controlled. But his face changed as he approached. He had this habit of narrowing his eyes slightly when he was processing something, like he was sorting through tabs in his head. Caleb's smile faltered. Just a beat. Barely noticeable. Then he turned, exaggerated his usual charm. Oh, hey, Uncle Al. Just telling the guys a story. You know, summer antics. Luis looked at the folder in his hand, then back at Caleb. Right? About that. I just printed something out. Insurance sent me a follow-up report by mistake. Apparently, they had my email from when I co-signed the policy years ago. Weird, huh? He held it up. I saw the logo on the top, Allied Insurance. Our policy. The report was only a few pages thick, but it looked heavy in his hands. I figured I'd double-check it before I tossed it, Luis said. Curious thing, though, the claim lists a description of the driver. Witness statement. Tall male, early 20s, dark hair, sunglasses, red hoodie. You were wearing that hoodie last month, weren't you, Caleb? The entire group went still. Caleb shifted his weight, the kind of micro-movement you make when you're trying to hide the fact that your knees just got weak. I mean, lots of people wear red hoodies. Luis tilted his head. Sure, but not a lot of them have your plate number. Or your haircut. And the witness got the timing down to the hour. Caleb's friends looked around awkwardly. One of them took a sip of beer without making eye contact with anyone. My cousin Benny fake coughed into his elbow. You're saying this like I was the one who did it, Caleb said, still keeping the tone casual, but there was an edge now. A thin thread of panic in his voice. Luis shrugged. No, I'm just repeating what the report said. Thing is, you told your parents Andres did it. That was the moment everything should have flipped. The moment my name should have been cleared, the sentence lifted, my sketchbooks returned, the grounding reversed. But instead, Mom stepped in, like she always did. Okay, let's not turn this into a scene, she said, clapping her hands once, sharp and final. It's a holiday. We're all just trying to enjoy ourselves. Luis turned to her. So, you're not curious about the fact that your son lied to get his brother punished? Mom hesitated. Just a blink. Then she sighed. Maybe it was just a misunderstanding. That was it. A misunderstanding. That's all she had to say after weeks of treating me like a criminal. No apology. No acknowledgement. Not even a second glance. Dad was standing by the cooler, pretending to organize drinks, but I could see the way his jaw was set. He heard it all. He just didn't want to deal with it. I dropped the plate of food on the grass and walked away. No one stopped me. That night was when the rage really hit. Not the loud, throw things around kind of rage. No, it was quieter, heavier. The kind that settles in your bones and makes your hands shake when you try to hold a pencil. I locked myself in my room, sat on the edge of the bed, and stared at the window for what felt like hours. I wanted to scream. But more than that, I wanted them to feel it, to see what they'd done. I wanted it to eat at them the way it had eaten at me every single day of that miserable summer. And just when I thought the damage couldn't go deeper, Mom knocked on the door. I didn't answer. She came in anyway, like always. "We need to talk," she said, closing the door behind her. I didn't look at her. "Look, your uncle made a big deal out of nothing. You know how dramatic he can be." I turned slowly. "You're seriously defending Caleb right now?" She sighed, like I was exhausting her. "Andres, your brother made a mistake. Everyone does. But trying to turn the whole family against him, that's not healthy." I stood up, heart pounding. "He lied. He threw me under the bus. And you let him. You were acting withdrawn," she said. "You've been moody lately. And you did ask about driving. Once. A year ago. In the school lot. For 10 minutes. You've always been sensitive," she said gently, like that explained everything. Like that was the catch-all excuse. Sensitive. The label they slapped on me whenever I called out unfairness. Whenever I didn't smile through the insults. She stepped closer. "Just let it go, okay? For the family." I stared at her, my own mother, and felt something break inside me. A bridge that couldn't be rebuilt. "You want me to let this go?" She nodded. "It's better that way." I didn't say another word. She left after a while, assuming silence meant agreement. It didn't. From that moment on, I knew I couldn't count on any of them. Not to defend me. Not to protect me. Not to see me. The next few days were worse, somehow. They acted like everything had been resolved. Like we were all supposed to just move forward. Dad went back to work like nothing happened. Mom started planning another backyard get-together. And Caleb? Caleb doubled down. He started calling me Crash every time he walked past. Loud enough that Mom heard. She'd laugh sometimes. Or shake her head like boys will be boys. It was humiliating. And when I told them to stop, I got told to grow thicker skin. That I needed to learn to take a joke. One night, I found my sketchbook ripped. Not destroyed, just enough to ruin 3 pages I'd been working on all week. They were smeared with what looked like soy sauce and something sticky, probably soda. My pencils had been rearranged. Some tips broken. Caleb swore he hadn't been in my room. Mom said it must have been my fault for leaving things out. I didn't sleep that night. I sat up and stared at the ceiling, repeating the same thought over and over. They don't care what's true. They never did. And that's when I realized, if I wanted things to change, I'd have to be the one to do it. Not by yelling. Not by begging. Not by arguing. But by proving it. On my terms. I used to think rock bottom would look like some dramatic outburst, screaming at my parents, slamming doors, maybe even running away like in those teen movies. But mine came in silence. It came in the way I started counting the ceiling tiles at night because I couldn't sleep. In how I stopped sketching entirely, even when I finally found an old, half-used sketchpad tucked behind my dresser. It came in the way I started avoiding the mirror because I didn't like who I saw anymore. I stopped talking at dinner. Stopped trying to defend myself. There was no point. Every word I said just sounded like noise to them. Caleb kept calling me Crash until it morphed into Captain Crash, like I was some failed comic book character. And the worst part? The jokes weren't even clever. They were lazy, but they still got laughs. Especially from Mom when she was sipping her wine, or Dad when he'd come home from a 12-hour shift and just wanted to hear something that made him chuckle, no matter how mean it was. By late July, I was a ghost in my own house. The summer sun filtered through the blinds like a reminder of everything I was missing. Late-night walks by the lake, my shifts at the bookstore where I actually felt useful, and sketching at the pier while music played from someone's Bluetooth speaker. It should have been my last summer before college. My last season of teenage freedom. Instead, I was trapped. And invisible. But you don't stay at rock bottom forever. Not if something inside you still flickers, no matter how dim. My rebuild didn't start with some big decision. It started with a secondhand laptop. One that Luis dropped off a week after the cookout. He didn't say much, just handed me a worn messenger bag and said, "Figured you could use this. You're smart, kid. You're not crazy." That laptop was slow. The battery barely lasted an hour unplugged, but it booted up, and for the first time in weeks, I had a private space again, somewhere I could breathe, somewhere I could be me. I didn't go straight to social media. I didn't post anything dramatic or ask for sympathy. Instead, I opened a blank document and just started writing. I didn't even know what it was at first. A rant? A diary? A story? It was all of it. Just memories, observations, conversations, sketches in words instead of pencil. And it felt good. The more I wrote, the clearer things became. Not just what Caleb had done, but what I had let them all convince me of. That I was weak, passive, not worth defending. But the truth? I wasn't weak. I was worn down. There's a difference. By early August, I started sketching again too, quietly, at night, in the back pages of an old yearbook I'd found in the attic. It wasn't ideal. The pages bled a bit and smelled like dust, but it was enough. I redrew things I remembered from work. Customers at the register, Marcy sipping iced coffee, the shelves stacked with fantasy novels, and those ridiculous cat calendars we sold every year. Then I drew them. My family. I drew Caleb first, hands in his pockets, smirk half-formed, one eyebrow cocked. I added cracks to his face, like porcelain, because that's how he felt to me now. Something that looked whole until it broke. I drew Mom too, but not how she looked. I drew her as a mirror. Her outline reflected whoever was standing in front of her. And Dad? I sketched him as a mountain with a hollow cave at the center. That night, I realized something. I wasn't just rebuilding me. I was learning how to see again. Not just observe, but interpret. And I could use that. A few days later, I made a secret Instagram account. No name. No photos of me. Just art. I uploaded a few sketches with captions that told mini stories. Nothing too personal, just enough to hint at emotion. The golden child wears a crown made of other people's silence. She doesn't talk much, but her mirror always lies. Some fathers stand tall only because they bury their sons. People responded. Not a lot at first, but enough. A handful of likes turned into a few follows. Comments came too. This hit hard. You just described my brother. Wow, I feel seen. That's when I knew I had something. Not fame, not money, but a voice. One they couldn't touch. And then, 2 weeks before school was supposed to start, Luis called. "Hey Andres, you free to swing by my place this weekend? I've got someone I want you to meet." I hesitated. "Who?" He chuckled. "Let's just say she works for a design firm downtown. She's looking for someone with a unique eye. I might have shown her a few sketches. Hope that's okay." I almost dropped the phone. He gave me the address, told me to bring whatever I had, digitally or on paper. I didn't even have proper folders or a portfolio. I used an old photo album I'd gutted, slipped in printed copies of my Instagram posts, and added a few original pencil pieces I hadn't shown anyone yet. I didn't tell anyone at home where I was going. I said I was going for a walk, then biked to Luis's place and changed into the only decent button-down I had, still a little wrinkled from last Easter. When I walked into that living room and shook hands with Melanie from Bluefinch Creative, I felt more me than I had in months. She flipped through my sketches, pausing often, asking questions. "What's this one mean? What inspired this? Did you study composition formally?" I told her the truth. No classes, just instinct and observation. A lot of pain. A lot of watching people pretend things were fine when they weren't. She smiled. "You've got a gift. We're starting an internship program this fall. I'd like you to be part of it. If you're interested." I wanted to cry. I didn't. But I wanted to. It wasn't paid, not yet. But it was real. And it was mine. I biked home in the dark, wind in my hair, heart beating fast. I wanted to bottle the feeling and drink it whenever things got bad again. Because they would. I knew that. But I had a foothold now. A place to stand. That night, I printed out the offer email and tucked it in the back of my sketchbook. I didn't tell anyone. Not yet. Not because I was scared, but because I wanted to choose when and how. This was mine. They didn't get to claim it or twist it. But of course, secrets don't last long in a house like mine. A few days later, I came home from a walk to find my room open. My sketchbook on the bed. The printed email missing. I stood there, staring at the empty spot. Then I heard Caleb laughing downstairs. "Looks like Crash is going to be an artist now," he said to someone. Probably Mom. Guess prison sketching is paying off. I clenched my fists. My rebuild wasn't finished. but the gloves were coming off. It's a strange thing, the shift from helpless to calculated. You don't notice it right away. It starts with a decision so small it barely registers. For me, it was when I didn't march downstairs and demand my email back. I wanted to. My hands were shaking, chest tight, words forming on my tongue before I even reached the stairs. But I stopped. Because this time, I didn't want an apology. I wanted an undoing. So instead of confronting Caleb, I waited. I let him think he'd won again. Let him laugh and parade his petty little theft. But what he didn't know, what no one in the house realized, was that I had already started building something bigger. Not just art. Not just a future. A case. That night, I called Uncle Luis. "Hey," I said quietly, making sure my door was locked. "Do you still have the insurance report?" He did. He'd scanned it, smart man that he was, and emailed it to himself for safekeeping. I asked him to forward it. He didn't ask why. I think he already knew. "You thinking of doing something?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. "But not yet. I need more." I needed everything. Over the next week, I started pulling together every thread I could find. I found the old group text from the day of the car crash, when I'd been at work all afternoon, and Marcy had texted me around 4:13 p.m. to ask if I could cover the register while she ran an errand. I'd replied with a selfie from the front counter, time-stamped and geotagged. I still had the screenshots. I dug through my old emails too, found a couple of shift confirmation messages from that same week. It was a small thing, but every piece mattered. Every receipt. Every timestamp. I even pulled up my Google Maps history from my phone and took screenshots showing I hadn't left the bookstore area that entire afternoon. And then I did something I hadn't done in months. I emailed Marcy. I didn't tell her the whole story, just that I was sorting through some old scheduling stuff and needed help confirming I was working the day of the car incident. She responded the next morning. "Of course. You totally were. You covered the register for like 5 hours while I dealt with my tire situation." What? I thanked her, saved the email, and sat back in my chair. That was when the pieces started to click into place. I wasn't just going to expose the lie. I was going to burn the script Caleb had written for our whole family. This neat little narrative where he was the golden boy and I was the expendable understudy. But to do it right, I needed an audience. And I knew exactly when they'd all be in the same room again. Mom's birthday. She always made a big deal about it. Invited half the extended family, made Dad string up lights in the backyard like it was a wedding, wore a different sundress for each part of the day. And this year, she'd planned it even bigger. Family reunion meets birthday bash, she called it. Perfect. 2 weeks out, I started planning. I got an old USB drive from Luis, one of those bulky silver ones with a keychain loop. I loaded it with everything: the insurance report, my texts, email logs, time-stamped photos, Google Maps history. I even added a PDF of the internship email. If Caleb wanted to mock me for getting somewhere on my own, I was going to show everyone just how far I'd come without his tricks. I made folders, labeled them clearly. Insurance fraud, work alibi, art internship, lies, just for flair. And then I designed a slideshow. Yeah, a slideshow. Each slide had a quote Caleb had said over the summer, followed by a screenshot or document disproving it. It was overkill. It was surgical. Slide 1, Caleb's story. Andres took the car without asking. I tried to stop him. Slide 2, my shift log. Slide 3, a text from Marcy. Slide 4, witness description from the insurance report. Slide 5, a quote from Caleb at the cookout. Honestly, it was too easy. By the time I finished it, I had 23 slides, each one tighter than the last. I knew it was petty. I knew it was dramatic. I didn't care. I emailed a copy to myself, saved it on Google Drive, put it on 2 separate USBs. One stayed in my pocket. The other I slipped into Luis's hands the night before the party. "Just in case," I said. He smirked. "You sure you're my nephew? This is next level." "I've had time," I said, "and a lot of motivation." The morning of Mom's birthday, I dressed casually. Didn't want to draw attention. I even helped set up the folding chairs and hang the dumb paper lanterns she ordered online. Caleb didn't lift a finger, of course. He strolled around with his Ray-Bans and his smug little bounce, drinking a smoothie like he was in a music video. "You gonna behave today?" he said to me at one point, smiling. I looked him dead in the eye. Of course. Wouldn't miss it. He clapped me on the shoulder like we were buddies. Like everything was fine. Like I was still the punching bag and he was still the king. It wasn't until late afternoon that the real guests started arriving. Cousins, aunts, Luis. Even Grandma rose in her floral muumuu. I waited. I bided my time. I kept the USB in my back pocket and my phone in my hand. The laptop was ready, connected to the flat screen Dad had mounted in the living room for entertainment. It was all queued up. Around 6 p.m., Mom gathered everyone inside for cake. Caleb lit the candles with that same practice swagger and led the singing with a voice just loud enough to remind people he was there. I stayed back, leaning against the wall, arms crossed. And when Mom finished blowing out the candles and everyone clapped, I stepped forward. "Hey, Mom," I said casually. "Before we do presents, can I show you something? I've been working on a project. Thought it might be fun to share." A few heads turned. Luis met my eye and nodded subtly. Mom blinked. "A project?" I smiled. "Yeah, sort of a family documentary." Caleb's brow furrowed. "You'll love it," I said. I turned to the laptop, clicked the file, and as the screen lit up with the title, "The Summer I Got Framed," I felt a shift in the air. People laughed at first. Thought it was a joke. A skit, maybe. Caleb laughed too, until the second slide hit. The one with his quote. Then the alibi. Then the time-stamped selfie. The room fell silent by slide 5. By slide 11, Mom's wine glass was shaking in her hand. By slide 17, Grandma Rose was frowning like she'd just been told her church was a scam. And Caleb? Caleb had stopped smiling altogether. When the final slide landed, his quote from the cookout paired with the insurance report's witness description, I turned around. No one spoke. Not a word. But I wasn't done yet. "See," I said calmly. "I tried telling you. I told all of you. But truth doesn't work when no one's listening. So I figured if I showed it to you like a Caleb story, full of drama and punchlines, you might finally pay attention." I looked at Mom. "You grounded me for 3 months. Took my sketchbooks. Called me sensitive." Then I turned to Dad. "You didn't even ask for proof. Just took his word. Because it was easier. And finally, Caleb, you knew I didn't do it. You lied because you could. Because you thought I wouldn't fight back." I let the silence sit there. Heavy. Uncomfortable. "I'm not here for an apology," I said. "I'm here to tell you I'm not playing this game anymore. And I won't let you define me. Ever again." Then I walked outside. Quiet. Calm. And behind me, I heard whispers. Gasps. And someone, maybe Luis, starting to clap. After I walked out of the living room, I didn't go far. I stood just outside the sliding glass doors, under the string lights, pretending to admire the garden while my heart pounded like it was trying to punch through my ribs. I wasn't nervous about what I'd done. I was awake. It was like breathing real air for the first time in months. Inside, the aftermath was already brewing. I could hear Mom's voice, sharp and defensive. Dad's low and unsure. Caleb's rising in protest, then cutting off abruptly, probably when someone hit him with a fact from the slideshow. And Luis. I imagined him standing with his arms crossed, not saying much, just letting the evidence speak. That was always his style. Let people bury themselves. About 15 minutes later, the door slid open. Caleb came out. His face was pale. Not angry. Not smug. Just hollow. I expected him to come at me with some half-hearted apology or one of those deflections he used when he knew he'd been caught, but didn't want to admit it. Instead, he just stood there, a few feet away, mouth opening like he was going to speak, but then closing again. "Got something to say?" I asked, keeping my tone flat. He looked down, hands in his pockets. "I didn't think you'd actually do it." "Yeah," I said. "You never do." He stood there for another beat, then turned and walked toward the driveway. A minute later, I heard the tourist start. Then he was gone. That was the last time I saw him that night. When I came back in, Mom was sitting at the dining table with her head in her hands. The guests had thinned out. A few relatives were pretending to clean up, mostly just trying to avoid eye contact. Luis gave me a nod from across the room, and "it's done" kind of look. He didn't need to say anything else. Dad was in the kitchen, pretending to be busy. I walked past him to get a glass of water, and he didn't say a word. That silence. It was the start of the fallout. The next morning, Caleb still wasn't home. I found out later that he'd driven to stay with a friend across town, some guy named Trenton who always had beer and zero parental oversight. He stayed there for 3 days. No calls. No texts. Mom barely spoke to me. She moved around the house like a ghost, cleaning things that weren't dirty, sighing dramatically as if she were the victim. When she finally did speak, it was one sentence at the dinner table. "You didn't have to humiliate him." I looked up from my plate. "No, I didn't." He did that himself. I just held up the mirror. She didn't respond. Dad, to his credit, pulled me aside later that night. His words were clumsy, his posture stiff, but I could tell he was trying. I didn't know, he said. I should have asked more questions. Should have listened. I nodded. Yeah, you should have. He winced like I'd slapped him. What you did, that took guts. I wasn't trying to be brave, I said. I was trying to survive. He didn't say much after that, but the next morning, I found my sketchbooks, all of them, stacked neatly on my desk. No note, no ceremony, just returned, like a silent apology. Caleb came back eventually. 3 days after the party, he walked in while I was in the living room sketching. He looked rough, unshaven, bloodshot eyes, hoodie pulled low. He didn't say anything, just went straight to his room and slammed the door. But that wasn't the end. A week later, Dad called a family meeting. That had never happened before. Not in our house. We all sat in the living room. Dad in his recliner, Mom on the edge of the couch, Caleb slouched next to her. I stayed by the bookshelf, arms crossed, waiting. Dad cleared his throat. We need to talk about consequences. Mom shifted. I think we've had enough drama. No, Dad cut in. This family's been running on silence and cover-ups for too long. And it ends now. He turned to Caleb. You lied. You damaged the car, blamed your brother, and let him take the fall. You let us punish him. For months. Caleb didn't look up. You're paying for the damage, Dad continued. Out of your savings. And you'll be paying Andres back, too, for the hours he lost at work. Mom opened her mouth again, but this time, Dad didn't let her speak. Marisol, no more excuses. He needs accountability. I felt a flicker of something in my chest. Not joy, not revenge, just relief. Andres, Dad said, turning to me, I'm sorry. Truly. I let him manipulate us. I let you down. I didn't know what to say. I'd never heard my dad apologize before. Not like that. Then he said something that nearly floored me. I've talked to Luis. He said you're taking an internship with that design firm. We're proud of you, and we'll support you however we can. That night, I sat on my bed staring at the ceiling again, but not out of hopelessness. This time, it was disbelief. The scales had tipped. For the first time in years, I felt like the truth had actually won in our house. But there was still one more piece left. A few days later, I asked Luis if he could give me a ride. To where, he asked. Insurance office. He raised an eyebrow. Planning something? Just finishing what Caleb started. When we got there, I asked to speak to the claims representative who'd handled the Ford incident. A woman named Claudia. I showed her the same slideshow, the time-stamped alibis, the emails. She sat quietly through all of it. When I finished, I asked her one question. Wasn't this technically insurance fraud? She nodded slowly. If the claim was filed under false pretenses, yes. It would be. Would that affect the policy? She tapped her pen. Potentially. It depends on whether the claim payout went through. But yes, we'd be obligated to flag the account and potentially revoke coverage if a fraudulent claim was confirmed. I nodded. I just wanted it noted in the file that I wasn't the driver, and that there's proof. She gave me a small smile. I'll make sure the file reflects the correction. I didn't push it further. I didn't ask for them to sue him or take legal action. I just wanted the truth on record. Something that would follow Caleb, even just a little. A pebble in his shoe. A week after that, the insurance company sent an official letter to our house. Policy adjustment. Driver correction. Incident responsibility reassigned. It wasn't a bombshell. It wasn't even something that would tank his life. But Caleb saw it. And when he did, he tore it in half and stormed out of the house. We haven't spoken since. Fall came quickly. I started my internship. Took the bus to the city 3 times a week. Met other artists. Built a portfolio. Even started selling a few pieces online. Small commissions. Nothing life-changing. But they were mine. One afternoon, as I was heading out the door, Mom stopped me. You look happy, she said softly. I am, I replied. She nodded. I'm glad. We stood there in silence for a moment. I'm sorry, she added, almost too quiet to hear. I didn't say anything back. I just nodded once and left. Because I'd already made peace with the fact that her apology would never be enough. Not for what she'd let happen. Not for what she let Caleb keep doing, year after year. But it didn't matter anymore. Not really. Because I'd built something stronger than their approval. I'd built myself. And one day, when Caleb tells some twisted version of the story, how he got framed, or misremembered, or took the fall, he'll still flinch every time someone asks, Didn't your brother expose all that with a slideshow at your mom's birthday? Because in the end, the truth doesn't need to shout. It just needs to be seen. And I made damn sure everyone saw it. I was standing in line at the campus print shop, staring at my phone and arguing with myself about whether I really needed a second copy of my graduation program, when my mom's name lit up the screen. It was 9:12 a.m., 2 days before my graduation. I remember the time because it's burned into my head now, like one of those moments you replay later and think, that's where everything went wrong. I almost let it go to voicemail. Almost. But something in my gut twisted, and I answered. "Jack," she said, breathless, like she'd been running. "I need you to come to the airport. Right now. I'm Jack, 23 years old, first in my family to graduate college." And at that moment, I honestly thought she was joking. My mom doesn't travel. She hates airports, hates crowds, hates being told what to do. So when I asked why she was even there, her voice dropped into this shaky whisper that immediately sent my heart into my throat. "I've been detained by security," she said. "I didn't do anything wrong, but they're not letting me leave. I don't know who else to call." I didn't even ask questions. I grabbed my backpack, left the papers on the counter, and walked straight out. The entire drive to the airport, my mind kept racing ahead to worst-case scenarios. I imagined her crying in some gray room, confused, maybe sick, maybe accused of something she didn't understand. I told myself this was what good sons did. They showed up. They didn't hesitate, especially not for the woman who raised them. That instinct to show up is probably my biggest flaw. For context, my family has always had a certain hierarchy. My mom runs the show emotionally. My dad passed away when I was in high school, and since then, everything revolves around keeping her calm, keeping the peace, keeping things from blowing up. My younger brother, Evan, sits comfortably at the center of that orbit. He's 20, loud, impulsive, and forever one bad decision away from a meltdown. And somehow, no matter what he does, it becomes everyone else's responsibility to manage his feelings. I've spent most of my life being the reasonable one, the buffer, the translator, the one who gets pulled aside and told, "You understand, right?" when something unfair happens. I understood when Evan dropped out of community college and moved back home. I understood when my mom quietly stopped asking him to contribute anything financially. I understood when every family dinner turned into a conversation about his plans, his stress, his potential, while mine were treated like background noise. Graduation was supposed to be different. For once, the attention was supposed to be on something I'd done. For years of working 2 part-time jobs, late nights, skipped trips, constant pressure to not fail because I couldn't afford to. I didn't make a big deal out of it, but inside, it meant everything. It was proof that I wasn't just the easy kid who could handle things on his own. I wanted them to see me. So when my mom called from the airport, fear cut straight through all of that. I sped the entire way there, rehearsing what I'd say to security, mentally pulling up my student ID like it would somehow help. I parked crooked, didn't even bother paying, and ran inside, scanning faces for hers. I didn't find her in a security office. I didn't find her crying or arguing with anyone in a uniform. I found her sitting at a cafe near baggage claim, calmly stirring sugar into a coffee. I stopped so fast I almost tripped. She looked up, saw me, and smiled. Not relieved, not shaken, just normal, like she'd invited me to meet her for lunch. "Oh good, you're here," she said. For a second, my brain refused to connect what my eyes were seeing. I actually asked, "Where are they?" because I still thought maybe she'd escaped or something. "Who?" she asked, genuinely confused. "The security people," I said. "You said you were detained." She waved her hand like I'd misunderstood a minor detail. "Oh, that. I just needed you to come quickly." I felt heat crawl up my neck. "Mom," I said slowly, "you told me you were detained. I thought something was wrong." "Well, something is wrong," she replied, lowering her voice and leaning in like this was some delicate secret. "Your brother is about to do something very stupid, and I need you to stop him." That's when the floor shifted under me. She explained it in pieces, casually, between sips of coffee. Evan had found out about a family issue. Her words. Something he wasn't supposed to know yet. Something she'd planned to tell him later, in a calmer setting, when he was in a better headspace. Apparently, he didn't take it well. Apparently, he'd been threatening to show up at my graduation and tell everyone the truth if she didn't fix it. And instead of handling that herself, Instead of being honest or setting boundaries, she decided the solution was to lie to me, manufacture an emergency, and pull me into the middle of it 2 days before the most important moment of my life. I remember standing there, listening, nodding automatically while something inside me quietly cracked. She talked about how fragile Evan was, how embarrassed the family would be if he caused a scene, how much pressure she was under. She didn't ask how I felt. She didn't apologize. She just assumed I would help, the same way I always had. At one point, she reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "You're the only one he listens to, Jack," she said. "You've always been so good at calming him down." I pulled my hand back, slowly. I wanted to say something sharp. I wanted to say a lot of things. Instead, I asked, "What's the secret?" Her jaw tightened. "That's not important right now." That answer told me everything and nothing at the same time. As she kept talking, outlining her plan for me to call Evan, meet him, reason with him, I felt a strange clarity settle in. Not anger yet. Not revenge. Just the realization that this wasn't a one-off mistake. This was a pattern. A script I'd been playing my entire life without questioning who wrote it or why I was always cast in the same role. I looked around the airport, at families hugging, people arriving, people leaving, everyone moving forward somewhere. And I realized that 2 days before I was supposed to walk across a stage and close one chapter of my life, my own mother had dragged me right back into the same old mess, without hesitation, without remorse. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from Evan. "You better talk to Mom. She's running out of time." I stared at the screen, then up at her, and for the first time, I didn't feel like the calm, dependable son. I felt like a fuse had been lit, and whatever this family secret was, it was about to change everything. I didn't respond to Evan's text right away. I slid my phone face down on the cafe table and looked at my mom. Really looked at her, like I was seeing her for the first time instead of the version of her I'd carried around in my head for years. She was calm now, almost relieved, like the hardest part of her day was already over because I'd shown up. That realization stung more than the lie itself. "Tell me exactly what you want me to do," I said. She exhaled, dramatic and heavy. "I need you to talk to your brother. Today. He's emotional, Jack. He doesn't think before he speaks. If he shows up at your graduation and starts saying things, it'll humiliate all of us. Especially me." There it was. Not especially me. Especially her. I asked again about the secret. She dodged it again. Said it was complicated. Said Evan had misunderstood. Said it was about money and timing and things I didn't need to worry about right now. Every sentence was designed to keep me in the dark just long enough to still be useful. As we walked out of the airport together, she laid out the plan like this was some kind of team project. I'd meet Evan at the house. I'd calm him down. I'd remind him how important my graduation was, how this wasn't the time for drama. I'd promise him that Mom would explain everything soon, just not right now. She said it like she'd already written my lines for me. "What if he doesn't listen?" I asked. She smiled tightly. "He always listens to you." That sentence followed me all the way home. Evan didn't listen. The second I walked into the house, I could feel the tension. He was pacing the living room, phone in hand, eyes red like he hadn't slept. The TV was on but muted. Mom hovered behind me like a supervisor, waiting to see how I'd handle it. "So," Evan said, stopping in front of me, "she finally sent you." "I came on my own," I said. He laughed, sharp and bitter. "Sure you did." I tried the calm approach first. Told him Mom was stressed. Told him graduation wasn't the place for whatever argument he wanted to have. Told him we could talk things out privately. As I spoke, I realized how rehearsed I sounded, like I was reading from the same script I'd been handed my whole life. "You don't even know what you're defending," he snapped. That stopped me. "Then tell me." He glanced at Mom. She shook her head, just slightly. "A warning." "Tell him," I said, looking at her. She crossed her arms. "This is not how we're doing this." Evan scoffed. "Of course it's not. You never do anything when you say you will." I could feel my patience thinning. "Evan, what is going on?" He stepped closer to me, lowering his voice. "Did you know," he said slowly, "that Mom has been using the money Dad left for both of us? Not just bills, not emergencies. For herself." I turned to her. "Is that true?" She looked offended. "That's not fair. That's not an answer," I said. She launched into a speech about sacrifices and stress and how hard it was to raise 2 boys alone. She said she deserved some flexibility. She said Evan was exaggerating. She said I was overreacting. Evan pulled out his phone and shoved it in my face. Bank statements, transfers, dates, amounts. I didn't understand all of it, but I understood enough to know this wasn't just a misunderstanding. What about my college savings? I asked quietly. Her silence was loud. I worked through school, I said. I took loans. You told me there was nothing left. You were capable, she said, like that explained everything. Evan needed more help. That sentence hit me harder than anything else that day. Evan laughed again, but there was no humor in it this time. See, this is why I'm done staying quiet. I'm not protecting her anymore. Mom panicked then, not because of what she'd done, but because of where Evan planned to say it. She grabbed his arm. You will not ruin your brother's graduation. He pulled away. I'm not ruining it. I'm telling the truth. In front of everyone who thinks you're some kind of saint. I stood there, feeling like the floor was tilting under me. Every memory started rearranging itself. Every time she praised Evan for needing her. Every time she told me to be patient. Every time my achievements were treated like conveniences instead of milestones. Why didn't you tell me? I asked her. She looked at me, and for a moment, her expression hardened into something cold. Because you would have judged me. That was the moment something in me snapped. Not loudly, not dramatically, just a quiet internal shift. I realized I wasn't angry because she'd used the money. I was angry because she'd decided, over and over again, that I didn't deserve honesty, that I could be managed, lied to, deployed. Evan was pacing again, talking about showing receipts, about making a speech, about how no one ever listened to him. Mom turned to me, eyes wide, desperate. Jack, she said, grabbing my sleeve. You have to fix this. I pulled my arm free. For once, I said, I'm not fixing anything. Her face changed instantly. The warmth vanished. The pleading turned sharp. Don't be selfish. Selfish. 2 days before my graduation. After being lied to, manipulated, and used as damage control. Evan stopped pacing and stared at me. You're really going to let her get away with this? I didn't answer him either. That night, I went back to my apartment and didn't sleep. My phone kept buzzing. Messages from Mom. Messages from Evan. Some angry. Some pleading. Some guilt-laced reminders of everything she'd ever done for me. I ignored them all and stared at the ceiling, replaying every conversation I'd ever had with my family, seeing the patterns I'd refused to see before. The next morning, I got an email from the university. Subject line, graduation seating update. I opened it without thinking. And that's when I saw my mother's name listed as the primary contact for my ceremony details. A role I didn't remember assigning. A role that came with certain permissions. At the bottom of the email was a note. Changes have been requested. My stomach dropped. I stared at that email for a long time before I really understood what I was looking at. Graduation seating update. My mom's name. Primary contact. Changes have been requested. I hadn't authorized any changes. I hadn't even known she still had access. My first instinct was to call her. My second instinct was to throw my phone across the room. I ended up doing neither. I just sat on the edge of my bed, elbows on my knees, staring at the floor like it might give me an explanation that made sense. When I finally logged into the university portal, my hands were shaking. I told myself I was being paranoid. That maybe it was a small thing. Maybe she'd just asked about arrival times or parking passes. That was still the version of me that wanted to believe she wouldn't cross certain lines. She had crossed them. My originally submitted guest list had been altered. Seats rearranged. Evan's name had been moved closer to the front. Mine was untouched, technically, but the people I'd invited, the few friends who had supported me through late nights and finals, had been quietly pushed to overflow seating. And listed under special notes was a request to allow an unscheduled family statement after the ceremony. I actually laughed when I read that. Not because it was funny, but because my body didn't know what else to do. An unscheduled family statement. This was her solution. If Evan couldn't be controlled, she'd control the stage. I emailed the registrar immediately, trying to sound calm and professional while my chest felt like it was caving in. I explained that the changes were unauthorized. I asked how this had happened. I asked how to reverse it. The response came hours later. They apologized. They said the primary contact on file had verified identity and made the request. They said changes like this were unusual, but technically allowed. They said they could correct it, but only if the primary contact approved the reversal. I closed my laptop and sat there in silence. That was rock bottom for me. Not the yelling, not the lies, not even the money. It was the realization that my own graduation, the thing I'd been holding onto as proof that all the sacrifices had been worth it, had become another stage for my family's dysfunction. Another thing I was expected to surrender quietly to keep the peace. I didn't go home that day. I didn't answer my phone. I walked around campus for hours, aimless, watching other students take pictures in caps and gowns, laughing with their families, hugging parents who looked proud instead of threatened. I felt invisible, and stupid, and small. That night, I did something I'd never done before. I wrote everything down. Not to vent, not to rant, just facts, dates, conversations, the airport call, the bank statements Evan showed me, the graduation changes. Every time my mom had said, "You're capable," as a reason not to help me. Every time I'd been told to calm Evan down instead of being allowed to feel my own anger. Seeing it all laid out stripped away the excuses. This wasn't chaos. It was a system, and I had been the pressure valve. I took a day off from everything. No family, no school emails, no graduation planning. I slept. I ate real food. I let myself feel how exhausted I was. Not tired, exhausted. Like someone who'd been carrying weight they never agreed to carry. On the second day, something shifted. It wasn't dramatic. I didn't wake up empowered or angry or ready for revenge. I woke up clear. I realized that whether or not my graduation went the way I wanted, my life didn't have to keep following the same script. I couldn't control Evan. I couldn't control my mom. But I could control access. I could control information. I could stop being the middleman. The first thing I did was call the registrar again. This time, I asked about removing my mom as primary contact entirely. They hesitated at first, but once I verified my identity and explained the situation, they told me it was possible. Paperwork. A form. A short processing window. I filled it out immediately. The second thing I did was open my email and send a short message to my department advisor. I explained that there were family issues, that I might need flexibility, that I wanted confirmation that no one else could speak or act on my behalf during the ceremony. He replied within an hour. He congratulated me on my graduation. He told me he'd make sure everything was handled appropriately. That message hit me harder than I expected. A stranger, essentially, showing me more respect for my boundaries than my own family ever had. Evan texted me again that night. Long messages. Angry ones. He accused me of choosing mom, of abandoning him, of being weak. Then, 10 minutes later, another message apologizing, saying he didn't mean it, saying he was scared. I didn't respond. That was new, and it felt wrong and right at the same time. My mom called, left voicemails. Her tone shifted from panic to anger to wounded disbelief. She said she couldn't believe I was shutting her out like this. She said she'd never done anything to hurt me intentionally. She said I was blowing things out of proportion. I saved the voicemails. I didn't listen to them again. Instead, I started focusing on what came after graduation, something I'd been putting off because I was so busy surviving. I updated my resume. I followed up on applications I'd half forgotten about. I reached out to a professor who'd once told me I had potential if I ever believed it myself. One of those conversations turned into an interview, then another, then a quiet, unexpected offer that made my hands shake when I read it. Not a dream job, but a real one. A start. A chance to move out of the orbit I'd been stuck in. I didn't tell my family. For the first time, something good was happening that wasn't immediately absorbed into Evan's narrative or my mom's stress. It was mine. The night before graduation, I sat alone in my apartment with my cap and gown laid out on the chair. My phone buzzed with another message from my mom. "If you don't come talk to us tonight, don't expect things to go smoothly tomorrow." I didn't reply. I thought about everything I'd lost by staying silent all those years. Opportunities, confidence, peace, and I thought about what I might lose if I finally stopped playing along. Then I opened my laptop and checked the university portal one last time. My mom's name was gone. No primary contact. No special notes. No unscheduled statements. Just my name. I should have felt relief. Instead, I felt something colder and sharper settle in my chest. Because I knew my mom wouldn't take this quietly. And I knew Evan wouldn't either. Graduation was in less than 12 hours. And for the first time, I wasn't worried about whether I could keep the peace. Graduation morning arrived quietly, which should have been my first warning. I woke up before my alarm, heart already racing, like my body knew something my brain hadn't caught up to yet. Sunlight came through the blinds in thin lines, lighting up the cap and gown I'd laid out the night before. For a moment, I just lay there staring at the ceiling, listening to my own breathing, grounding myself. No missed calls. No new messages. Nothing from Mom. Nothing from Evan. That silence wasn't peace. It was strategy. I showered, got dressed, and moved through the morning with a strange calm. Not happiness. Not dread. Focus. The kind that comes when you finally accept that something is going to happen whether you're ready or not. So you might as well be ready. On my way to campus, my phone buzzed. A text from a number I didn't recognize. We need to talk before the ceremony. It's important. Please don't do this to your mother. I didn't reply. I didn't even ask who it was. I knew. When I arrived at the venue, everything looked exactly like it should. Students milling around in gowns, families lining up with cameras, staff directing people toward entrances. From the outside, it was a perfect, ordinary graduation day. That contrast almost made me dizzy, knowing what was sitting just beneath the surface. I checked in, got my seat assignment, and took my place with my classmates. As I sat down, I spotted Evan across the room. He wasn't in the section Mom had requested for him. He was further back, jaw clenched, eyes scanning the crowd like he was looking for an opening. When our eyes met, he looked away first. That was new too. I didn't see my mom right away, which meant she was waiting. She liked dramatic entrances, liked positioning herself so she could read a room before stepping into it. I'd watched her do it at school meetings, family gatherings, even funerals. Always just outside the center, ready to pivot. The ceremony started. Speeches. Applause. Names being read. I tried to stay present, but my attention kept drifting outward, cataloging exits, faces, movements. I felt like I was watching a play I'd already read the script for, except someone had changed a few key scenes without telling me. Then I heard my name. I stood, walked across the stage, shook hands, accepted my diploma. The applause was polite, warm. I smiled for the camera. And for a brief, surreal moment, everything else faded away. I had done this. I had earned it. No one could take that part from me. As I stepped back into line, my phone buzzed again. She's crying. You don't have to do this. Just let her speak. I slipped the phone back into my pocket without reading the rest. The ceremony ended without incident. No shouting. No public meltdown. No secret revealed to a captive audience. I could practically feel my mom's frustration from across the room as people stood, clapped, hugged their graduates. The stage she tried to claim had closed without her. That should have been the end of it. It wasn't. Outside the venue, families gathered in clusters. Photos. Congratulations. Laughter. I stood with a couple of friends, taking pictures, answering questions about plans after graduation. I kept my responses vague, non-committal. My life had already been treated like communal property once. I wasn't offering previews anymore. That's when my mom approached. She looked composed, smiling. Anyone watching would have thought this was a proud mother coming to congratulate her son. But I knew that expression, the tightness around the eyes, the way her smile didn't reach them. Jack, she said, pulling me into a hug before I could step back. I'm so proud of you. I didn't hug her back. I didn't push her away either. I just stood there still. We need to talk, she said softly. Alone. Not today, I replied. Her smile faltered for half a second. It won't take long. I said not today. People were watching now. That mattered to her. I could see her recalculating, switching tactics. Evan appeared at her side, eyes darting between us. You really think you can just ignore this? He said. After everything? I looked at him calmly. Yes. That answer seemed to knock the wind out of him more than any argument would have. They left shortly after, stiff and silent, while I stayed behind and let myself enjoy the rest of the afternoon. But even as I laughed and posed for photos, my mind was already moving ahead. Because I knew this wasn't over. My mom didn't lose control and walk away. She regrouped. That evening, my phone rang. A number I recognized this time. Jack, my aunt said. Your mother is beside herself. She says you humiliated her. There it was. The narrative was already spreading. I listened quietly as my aunt explained how worried everyone was, how Mom had been under so much pressure, how Evan was acting out because he's hurt, how maybe I could just come over and smooth things out like I always did. I thanked her for calling and told her I'd think about it. Then I called someone else. The professor who'd helped me with my job lead answered on the second ring. We talked logistics, start dates, relocation, paperwork. The conversation was straightforward, professional, respectful. Everything my interactions with my family weren't. By the time we hung up, a plan was forming. Not revenge yet. Preparation. Over the next few days, I did everything quietly. I secured my documents. Birth certificate, social security card, financial records. I changed passwords, updated contact information. I opened a new bank account at a different institution and began transferring what little savings I had, piece by piece. I also did something I'd never done before. I went back to those bank statements Evan had shown me and asked questions. Carefully, methodically. I spoke to someone at the bank, then another person, then a legal aid office that offered free consultations for recent graduates. I didn't accuse. I didn't threaten. I just asked what my options were if money intended for me had been misused. The answers were interesting. Meanwhile, the messages from my family escalated. Mom alternated between wounded and furious. Evan swung between apologetic and hostile. Extended relatives chimed in, each one carrying a slightly altered version of the story that somehow always painted me as the problem. I stopped responding entirely. Silence, I learned, is unsettling to people who rely on your reactions. One night, Evan showed up at my apartment unannounced. I didn't open the door, but I listened as he knocked, then pounded, then leaned against it and slid down to the floor. "You don't understand what you're doing," he said through the door. "If you don't fix this, she's going to lose everything." That sentence stuck with me, not because it scared me, because it confirmed something I'd been circling for days. This wasn't about family harmony. This was about consequences. And for the first time in my life, they were afraid those consequences might finally land somewhere other than on me. I didn't answer Evan. I waited until he left, then sat on the floor with my back against the door, heart pounding, mind racing. I wasn't planning to make a public scene. I wasn't planning to yell or expose secrets out of spite. But I was done protecting people who had never protected me. And as I looked at the folder on my desk, filled with documents, notes, timelines, and names, I realized I wasn't reacting anymore. I didn't make the next move out of anger. That surprised even me. I slept on it. 2 nights, actually. I kept replaying Evan's words in my head. She's going to lose everything. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized how revealing that statement was. Not we're going to lose everything. Not the family. Just her. Everything had always been framed that way. Her stability, her reputation, her control. And for years, I'd been trained to believe that protecting those things was my responsibility. It wasn't. On Monday morning, I walked into the legal aid office with a folder under my arm and a calm I'd never felt before. I laid everything out. The bank statements, the original paperwork from my dad's estate, the timeline of withdrawals, the notes I'd taken after speaking with the bank. I didn't exaggerate. I didn't editorialize. I just told the truth and answered questions. The lawyer, a woman about my mom's age, listened without interrupting. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair and folded her hands. "You're not asking for revenge," she said. "You're asking for accountability." That word landed differently than I expected. She explained my options. None of them were dramatic. None involved public spectacle or shouting matches or surprise speeches. Just paperwork, letters, deadlines, quiet processes that moved forward whether emotions were ready or not. I chose the option that protected me and forced the truth into daylight. The formal notice went out that afternoon. My mom received it first. Then Evan. Then, because of how things had been structured, a copy went to a couple of extended family members who had been listed as secondary contacts on the original estate paperwork. People she had always assumed would never look too closely. She called me less than an hour later. I let it go to voicemail. Her message wasn't angry. It wasn't pleading. It was panicked. "Jack," she said, voice shaking. "There has been a mistake. We can fix this. You don't understand what you're doing. Please call me." I didn't. Evan texted next. "What did you do?" I still didn't respond. Instead, I went to work. My new job had started that morning, and for the first time, my life felt like it existed somewhere other than inside my family's chaos. I learned names. I set up my desk. I drank bad office coffee and listened to conversations that had nothing to do with guilt or obligation or managing someone else's emotions. By the end of the day, I had 7 missed calls. That night, my aunt showed up at my apartment. Not Evan. Not my mom. Her. She sat across from me at my kitchen table, hands wrapped around a mug she hadn't asked for, eyes sharp and assessing. "Why didn't you come to us first?" she asked. "I did," I said. "For years. You just didn't listen. She sighed. Your mother is in real trouble. I know. She says she was planning to tell you everything. She's been saying that my whole life. That seemed to take some wind out of her. She looked down at her hands, then back up at me. You know this will change things permanently. Yes, I said. That's the point. She left not long after, quieter than she'd arrived. The fallout came in waves. First, the financial one. Accounts were frozen pending review. Questions were asked. Documentation was requested. My mom's carefully maintained image as the long-suffering, selfless parent began to crack under the weight of facts she couldn't explain away. Then came the family reckoning. Group chats went silent, then restarted, then fractured. Some relatives defended her out of habit. Others went quiet when they realized they might be asked uncomfortable questions too. Evan tried to position himself as both victim and whistleblower, depending on who he was talking to, but without my participation, his story didn't land the way he expected. And then there was my mom. She didn't scream at me again. She didn't accuse me of betrayal. She stopped calling entirely. That silence was louder than any argument we'd ever had. Weeks passed, then months. The legal process resolved the way processes like that usually do, slowly, methodically, without ceremony. Funds that should never have been touched were accounted for. Not all of them could be recovered. That hurt. But what mattered more was that the truth was now documented. Permanent. Unarguable. Evan moved out of her house not long after. Reality hit him harder than he expected once there was no one left to shield him from consequences. We haven't spoken since. I hear things through other people. Enough to know he's struggling. Not enough to pull me back in. My mom sent me one last message. I read it weeks after it arrived. She wrote that she never meant to hurt me. That she thought I was strong enough to handle things. That she didn't realize how much she'd taken until it was gone. I believed she meant it. I also believed it was too late. I didn't reply. My life now is quieter. Smaller in some ways. Bigger in others. I go to work. I pay my bills. I make plans without asking permission. I celebrate milestones without bracing for interference. The constant tension I'd lived with for so long is gone, and in its absence, I've learned something unexpected. Peace isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself. It just shows up one day and stays. I still have my diploma. It's framed on my wall, slightly crooked because I hung it myself without measuring. Every time I look at it, I don't think about the ceremony or the drama or the secret that almost consumed it. I think about the moment I stopped being the family's solution and started being my own person. And I don't regret it for a second.